Recently, I wrote about Mark Twain finding his way and establishing his reputation as a writer of travel and adventure. You can see remnants of this on public television today, shows about travel and adventure. Even in a country as vast and wide open as America, most people lived a life of narrow confinement. Therefore, there was a large and avid audience for tales from distant, exotic locations, thrilling sights, and as an added bonus, dashes of heart-pounding excitement. Because it was also true, or supposedly so, this was also educational. Other writers and publications were quick to take their cue from this. Very little local activity could match a report from a place where just the mention of the name, Paris, Istanbul, the Alps, Bombay, China, could ignite the imagination. One such reporter had the added distinction of being a woman, Nellie Bly. That name came from a song by Stephen Foster. She acquired it when her family moved to Pittsburgh, her father in search of employment. Born Elizabeth Jane Cochran in 1864, she was about 19 years old at the time. She read a piece in the newspaper which she felt was strongly misogynistic, and it so upset her that she immediately penned a stinging reply and sent it to the paper. The editor read it and was so impressed that he ran an ad asking the author of the letter to meet with him in person. She did, and she made a favorable impression. He asked her if she could write another piece. She did, and he offered her a job as a reporter. They came up with the name she would use, Nellie Bly. She wrote about the lives of ordinary people and specialized in stories about people working in deplorable conditions for long hours and miserable pay. The result of this was that the businesses began to cancel their advertising contracts with the paper, and Bly was reassigned to reporting on fashion, society, the arts, and gardening. Completely dissatisfied with that, she took off for Mexico, being what they called headstrong. She remained there for 6 months, sending back a series of regular reports on the people and conditions she found there. When she returned, these reports were collected and bound into a book, which was well received. She was reestablished as a serious reporter and ready for her next big break. She was asked to report on an insane asylum on Blackwell's Island. The mentally ill were segregated as if they were lepers. In order to do this, Bly would have to go undercover, posing as a madwoman, and be sent as a patient to the asylum. She readily agreed to this. She checked into a boarding house and began acting crazy. After one night of this, the police were called, and they turned her over to a doctor for examination. Other papers ran brief notices on this odd, crazy woman. She was deemed insane and sent to the asylum on Blackwell's Island, where she remained for 10 days, enough time to gather interviews and to document the horrid conditions: rotten food, rats, regular beatings, and no medical treatment at all. The newspaper requested her release, and she wrote alarming reports that this time provoked positive reaction from a rather shamed society. Bly was not just a reporter, she was also a reformer. She got the idea to replicate, for real, Phineas Fogg's famous journey around the globe. What a stunt! With great fanfare, she left by steamship across the Atlantic, met with Jules Verne in France, bought a monkey in Singapore, and returned to Pittsburgh on a private train commissioned by Joseph Pulitzer himself, completing the astounding trip in 72 days. That sealed her fame. Songs were written about her, plays, and much later movies. Nellie Bly was synonymous with daring, gripping journalism. At the age of 31, she married Robert Seaman, 73, a wealthy industrialist who ran a company that made metal containers like milk cans and oil drums. When he died about 10 years later, she ran the company and acquired several patents for her container design. The company did go broke, looted by employees who embezzled it into bankruptcy. She was an ardent defender of women's rights and lived to see the passage of the 19th Amendment, giving women the right to vote, in 1920. She died in 1922 and is still remembered for her steely self-determination and courageous journalism, especially in a time when women were not expected to act or even think like that.